Hi, welcome. This is a short horror story I wrote inspired by a chilling urban legend from Japan. The plot is about a teacher investigates strange accidents happening around her students after they start hearing about Hanako-san. Each incident seems tied to a specific child who bullied a fellow student years ago. The legend feels like more than just a haunting. It's personal. Curious about the plot twist? Welcome to the Urban and Myth Podcast, Episode 2. Hanako-san Revenge. Scary school story in Japanese urban legend. Chapter 1. The Whispers Begin. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the windows of Sakura Middle School, casting long shadows across the empty hallways. Miss Kato tapped the stack of papers on her desk, trying to focus on her grading, but the whispers from her students echoed in her mind, impossible to ignore. They had been gossiping about Hanako-san, the ghost in the girls' bathroom. She had brushed it off at first. Urban legends were a dime a dozen in schools like hers. Every generation of students brought with them new fears and tales of haunted bathrooms, abandoned rooms, or shadowy figures. But this one felt different. Taro, one of her more mischievous students, had spread the story like wildfire, and ever since, strange things had been happening. 2 days ago, a student named Saki had been found sprawled on the floor of the girls' bathroom unconscious. She had no memory of what had happened, but the fear in her eyes was palpable when she woke. Then, just yesterday, another student had fallen down the stairs, claiming to have seen a little girl in a school uniform staring at her from the bathroom doorway. Miss Kato glanced up from her papers, her gaze drifting to the clock. The ticking seemed louder today, each second dragging on as if time itself was holding its breath. The whispers of Hanako-san crept back into her thoughts, leaving an unsettling chill in the room. She shook her head, trying to dispel the eerie feeling. It was just a story. That's all it was, just a story. But when her classroom door creaked open and no one was there, she couldn't shake the sense that something or someone was watching her. Chapter 2. Accidents or Something More. Miss Kato's unease grew with each passing day. The accidents were becoming more frequent, and the students' whispers about Hanako-san never ceased. Akira, a normally quiet boy, had slipped during gym class and broken his arm. His parents were furious, demanding answers, but none of the teachers could explain it. There had been no water on the floor, no loose equipment. Yet Akira swore he had seen a girl standing by the bleachers, her hair long and dark, just before he fell. These were more than coincidences. Miss Kato found herself lingering after school, staring at the closed door of the girls' bathroom. It felt ridiculous, and she was a grown woman, a teacher no less, and yet something about the stories gnawed at her. She couldn't let it go. She reached for the door handle, but stopped when she heard the faintest sound, like a giggle. The air around her felt colder, sharper, as if the very atmosphere had shifted. Miss Kato pulled her hand back, her heart hammering in her chest. She scolded herself for being ridiculous, but the feeling of being watched returned, stronger now. As she walked away, footsteps echoed behind her, soft and deliberate. She turned, but the hallway was empty, save for the flickering lights above. Her palms felt clammy as she quickened her pace, desperate to leave the school behind. By the time she reached her car, Miss Kato couldn't shake the image of that closed bathroom door and the giggle that seemed to linger in her ears. Something wasn't right. She could feel it in her bones. The next day, another student was found at the foot of the stairs, clutching their side in pain, whispering the same name, Hanako. Chapter 3. The Legend of Hanako-san. The school was buzzing with rumors now, and it was impossible to ignore the growing tension among the students. Miss Kato had overheard fragments of conversation, stories of a girl who had died in the school long ago, her spirit doomed to haunt the bathroom. The name Hanako-san was on everyone's lips, and the accidents only seemed to fuel the legend. In her office, Miss Kato sat in front of her computer, fingers hovering over the keyboard. She hesitated before typing, feeling foolish for even considering looking into an urban legend. But something inside her pushed her forward. She had to know more. Her search revealed a chilling story. Hanako-san was said to be the ghost of a young girl who had died in a school bathroom during World War II. The details varied. Some said she was a victim of a bombing raid, while others claimed she had taken her own life after relentless bullying. But one thing remained the same. Her spirit lingered, seeking revenge on those who crossed her. Miss Kato frowned. Could it really be connected? She leaned back in her chair, the office suddenly feeling too small, too dark. The idea of a vengeful spirit stalking her students seemed absurd, yet the accidents couldn't be ignored. She thought back to her own school days, to a memory that had been buried deep in her mind. She had known a girl named Hanako once, hadn't she? But that was impossible. The timeline didn't match up. Her Hanako had been a quiet, shy girl from her childhood, not some long-dead spirit from the war. Still, the coincidences gnawed at her. A chill ran down her spine as she recalled the name scratched into the bathroom mirror. "Do you remember me?" Miss Kato stood abruptly, her heart pounding. She needed answers, but she wasn't sure she was ready for the truth. Chapter 4. The Past Unburied. Sleep had become elusive. Every time Miss Kato closed her eyes, memories of her childhood floated to the surface, uninvited and sharp as glass. There was a Hanako, a quiet, mousy girl from her elementary school days. The memories were hazy, like a fogged window. She couldn't quite clear, but fragments broke through. Miss Kato had been part of a group of kids who teased Hanako mercilessly. She hadn't thought much of it back then, just childish fun, a game of pointing out differences and mocking them. But the look in Hanako's eyes, the quiet despair, was now etched in her mind. She hadn't been cruel, not like the others, or so she told herself. Her hands shook as she held an old class photo, pulled from the depths of a dusty drawer. There, near the corner, stood Hanako, her small frame nearly swallowed by her oversized uniform. The girl didn't smile. She never had. Miss Kato stared at her younger self beside Hanako, laughing, carefree. How had she forgotten this? Suddenly, the memories rushed back with more clarity. Hanako had disappeared one day. The teachers had said she had transferred, but there had been rumors, a tragic accident, something about the school bathroom. Miss Kato felt bile rise in her throat. Could it be? No, it couldn't. Her Hanako couldn't be the same one haunting the school now. But the signs were undeniable. The accidents, the messages, "Do you remember me?" were meant for her. She had been part of Hanako's suffering, whether she wanted to admit it or not. And now the ghost of her past had returned, not just to torment the students, but to settle the score with her. Miss Kato's breath quickened. She had to find out the truth about what happened to Hanako. She had to know if this was all just coincidence, or if she was next. Chapter 5. The Reckoning. The halls of Sakura Middle School were empty, the after-hours silence thick with tension. Miss Kato stood outside the girls' bathroom, staring at the door as if it might open on its own. She had avoided this place for days, but now there was no turning back. Every nerve in her body screamed for her to leave, to run and never return, but something stronger, guilt perhaps, held her in place. Her hand trembled as she pushed the door open. The air inside was cold, unnaturally so, and her breath came out in shallow clouds. The faint scent of mildew clung to the tiled walls, but it was the silence that pressed hardest against her chest. No sound of dripping faucets, no shuffling feet, just the oppressive stillness. Miss Kato stepped inside, her footsteps echoing louder than they should in the confined space. She glanced at the mirrors, half expecting to see a shadow behind her. Nothing, just her own pale reflection, looking more haggard by the day. And then she heard it. A soft giggle, unmistakably a child's. It came from one of the stalls at the far end. Miss Kato's heart seized in her chest, her throat tight with fear. She moved slowly, each step feeling like a lead weight. She could hear the tap, tap, tap of something wet hitting the floor, like water dripping or something worse. When she reached the last stall, her fingers hesitated on the door handle. The giggling stopped, replaced by a whisper that sent a chill down her spine. "Do you remember me now?" Miss Cato's breath hitched. She flung the door open, but the stall was empty. Only the floor was wet, a dark puddle seeping outward. She stumbled back, her heart pounding as the mirror across the room fogged up, slowly revealing a message. "I have been waiting." Her legs gave out beneath her as the truth hit her like a freight train. This wasn't just about the students. It had never been about them. It was about her. Hanako had come back, not just for vengeance on those who bullied her, but for the one who had stood by and done nothing. Chapter 6. Hanako's Revenge. Miss Cato's breaths came in short, panicked bursts as she backed away from the fogged mirror. The words, "I've been waiting," glistened in the condensation, an accusation written in the air itself. She tried to stand, but her legs felt numb, heavy with the weight of realization. A flicker of movement caught her eye in the corner of the mirror. Slowly she turned. There, standing just behind her, was Hanako. Her school uniform was soaked, her hair hanging wet over her face, obscuring her features. But it was her eyes, those dark, accusing eyes that held Miss Cato frozen in place. The same eyes that had once stared at her in class, silent and pleading for help that never came. The sound of dripping water filled the air again, louder this time, pooling at Hanako's feet. Miss Cato opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. What could she say? What could she possibly do to make up for the years of torment that had led to Hanako's death? "I'm sorry," Miss Cato finally whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't know. I didn't mean for any of it." Hanako tilted her head as if considering the apology, but the coldness in her eyes never wavered. The temperature in the bathroom seemed to plummet, and Miss Cato felt an icy grip tighten around her throat. "You didn't stop them," Hanako whispered, her voice echoing with the weight of years. "You watched, you laughed." The words were like knives. Miss Cato could feel them cutting into her, the truth of her past unraveling all the lies she had told herself over the years. She had been a part of it. She had let it happen. "Please," Miss Cato begged, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know." But it was too late. Hanako took a step forward, her figure flickering like a shadow in the dim light. The room felt smaller, darker, as though the walls were closing in. Miss Cato scrambled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The door was locked, the window sealed. And then Hanako's hand reached out, cold and wet, closing around Miss Cato's wrist. The teacher's scream died in her throat as the world around her seemed to shift. She felt herself pulled, dragged toward the mirror. She clawed at the tiles, but her hand slipped, leaving red smears in her wake. Her reflection stared back at her, wide-eyed with terror, as Hanako pulled her closer. The mirror rippled like water, its surface no longer glass, but something alive, something waiting. With one last desperate scream, Miss Cato disappeared into the mirror, swallowed by the darkness within. The next morning, Sakura Middle School buzzed with gossip. Another teacher had gone missing. The students whispered about Hanako-san, their voices a mix of fear and excitement. In the girls' bathroom, the mirror gleamed clean, reflecting only the empty room, except if you looked closely enough, you might have seen the faint outline of a woman, her hands pressed against the glass, her mouth open in a silent scream,